Okay, picture this. A financial heist so massive and executed so perfectly that it's literally transferring wealth right out of your pocket. And the craziest part, not a single alarm is going off. That is the chilling premise of a really fascinating new financial analysis we're diving into today. This explainer unpacks the argument that an invisible, massive wealth transfer is fundamentally rewriting how money works in the United States, happening completely under the radar. To really grasp this, the source starts with a number that, let's be real, kind of breaks the human brain. $38 trillion. We are rapidly closing in on a $38 trillion national debt. To put that completely absurd number into perspective, if you took 38 trillion $1 bills and stacked them on top of each other, that pile wouldn't just reach the moon, it would shoot right past it. For decades, politicians have just brushed this off, telling us deficits don't matter. But according to the analysis, in 2024, the underlying math of our economy officially changed. And here is where we hit the crux of the crisis. The explainer points out that for the very first time in history, the US government is now spending more money simply paying off the interest to past bondholders than it spends to equip the entire modern military or even to fund the entire Medicaid program. Think about that. The interest bill alone is now creeping up to a staggering $1 trillion a single year. There's a quote from the source material that really hits the nail on the head. It says, "The debt is no longer just a passive number. It is a predator that is beginning to consume the budget of the United States government." You see, because the government has all these mandatory promises, like Social Security and Medicare, that are politically impossible to break, they can't just trim their budget the way you or I would. Instead, this interest burden creates a mathematical feedback loop. It's essentially like taking out a brand new credit card just to pay the minimum monthly balance on your old one. So you might be wondering, how on earth do we get out of a debt trap of this magnitude? Well, the analysis outlines that there are really only three traditional ways out. Option one is austerity. That means brutal tax hikes and slashing spending. But that's politically toxic because it would almost certainly trigger a depression. Option two is explicit default, just flat out refusing to pay. But that's the nuclear option. It would crash the global banking system literally overnight. So, according to the source, the government has quietly chosen option three, a soft default. Now, the math behind this soft default is actually kind of brilliant, in a terrifying way. The idea is you don't refuse to pay the debt, you just pay it back in currency that's worth significantly less. By keeping interest rates lower than inflation, the government effectively erases trillions in debt purchasing power. Let's say you owe $30 trillion, and inflation is running at 5%. The real purchasing power of what you owe shrinks. In a single year, $1.5 trillion of real debt value just evaporates. And they didn't even have to raise a single tax. The bondholders still get paid, sure, but their money buys fewer groceries. To actually pull off this soft default without causing an absolute panic in the markets, the source outlines what it calls a three-tool playbook. It's basically a modern upgrade of financial repression, which is a strategy the US actually used right after World War II. But today, the tools are so sophisticated that the average citizen barely notices the shift in wealth until it's already gone. Let's break down exactly how this playbook works. Tool number one is something called the captive buyer. Look, in a normal free market, if someone is $38 trillion in debt, you would demand a massive interest rate to lend them money, right? The risk is just astronomical. But the government obviously can't afford a high rate, so what do? They rig the market. Through a super complex web of modern banking regulations, they legally force financial institutions to buy and hold US treasuries, regardless of how low the returns are. The explainer argues this creates a totally artificial demand, forcing the whole financial system to lend to the government at artificially suppressed rates. There's a quote from the analysis that perfectly sums this up. Your pension fund isn't buying government debt because it's a good investment, it's buying it because it's against the law not to. All right, moving on to tool number two, which the explainer refers to as the broken compass. Since massive government payouts, think Social Security, are directly tied to the official inflation numbers, the state has a multi-billion-dollar incentive to keep that official number as low as possible. And how do they do that? By constantly tweaking the math. A prime example given is substitution bias. If the price of steak goes way up, the official formula just assumes, hey, you'll just buy a cheaper hamburger instead. This convenient little statistical trick masks the true drop in your actual standard of living. The implications here are absolutely staggering. The analysis points out that if we calculated inflation using the exact same metrics we used back in the 1980s, today's true inflation rate would consistently be double the officially reported number. By suppressing this data through statistical sleight of hand, the source claims consumers are essentially being gaslit about the true cost of their own survival, all to keep the government's budget from exploding. Which brings us to tool number 3, fiscal dominance. Historically, the central bank, the Federal Reserve, was fiercely independent. Its one main job was to protect the value of your dollar. But in an era of fiscal dominance, the explainer argues that independence completely vanishes. The Fed's primary job shifts to just keeping the Treasury solvent. So when foreign nations step back and stop buying US debt, the Federal Reserve steps in as the buyer of last resort. They literally print new money out of thin air to buy the bonds that nobody else wants. This massive influx of freshly printed money might suppress bond yields, but it floods the entire economy with dollars, inflating what the source calls the everything bubble. Sure, your stock portfolio goes up, your house value goes up, and it all projects this amazing illusion of prosperity. But, as the explainer perfectly quotes, it is a monetary mirage. You have more dollars, but those dollars buy less than they did 10 years ago. The government is paying off its debt by quietly diluting your slice of the wealth pie. So, who actually wins and who loses in this scenario? Well, the analysis brings up an 18th century concept to explain this, called the candy-on effect. It reveals a really simple but harsh truth. When new money is printed, it doesn't just drop out of a helicopter evenly to everybody. Instead, it flows directly into the hands of massive financial institutions first. They get this free cash at basically zero interest, and they use it to buy up stocks and real estate way before the prices rise for the rest of us. And that dynamic brings us to the brutal reality of a K-shaped economy. The explainer argues this playbook heavily favors the asset-owning class, the top 10%, who receive that new money first and watch their wealth just explode upward. Meanwhile, the wage-earning class, the bottom 90%, receives that money last only after it finally trickles down as wages. And by then, the prices for groceries and rent have already skyrocketed. This is effectively liquidating the American middle class just to service the national debt. Because of this deliberate, continuous devaluation, the old-school rules of money are completely out the window. For decades, we were all told the same thing. Work hard, save your cash in a bank, and buy safe government bonds. But the source makes a really bold claim here. It says, in a world of fiscal dominance, this advice is financial suicide. The safe option is deliberately being destroyed, which is pushing society into an era of forced speculation, basically forcing you to gamble in stocks, real estate, or crypto just to outrun the melting of your own currency. But wait, it gets heavier. The analysis issues a really stark warning about the endgame of all this: central bank digital currencies, or CBDCs. Right now, if a bank decides to charge you negative interest to hold your money, you still have an exit valve, right? You can withdraw physical cash and keep it in a safe. The explainer warns that a CBDC totally removes that exit. It gives the state total control, allowing them to instantly apply negative rates or even put expiration dates on your money to force you to spend it. It argues this isn't about convenience at all, it's about trapping capital. Now, if you think governments wouldn't go that far, the explainer reminds us to look at history. Back in 1933, the US government didn't just quietly inflate the currency. They went ahead and explicitly criminalized the private ownership of gold. They threatened prison for citizens who simply held the asset used to protect themselves against inflation. This historical precedent suggests that desperate governments will inevitably write new laws to target whatever scarce assets people try to use as life rafts today. So, from the hidden mouth of a soft default, right through to the manipulation of inflation metrics and the looming threat of programmable digital money, this analysis paints a picture of a $38 trillion burden being managed squarely at the expense of the everyday saver. As we all try to navigate this rapidly shifting economic reality, we're left to ponder one final, deeply chilling question. In an era where the fundamental rules of money are constantly being rewritten by those in power, is your safe actually safe?